Hey, what's up guys? It's Texuma talking to you here, and today I want to talk about something interesting. Today I want to compare two devices that are probably upcoming in the next few months and help you decide if you should go for one or another. And which devices am I talking about? Well, today I will be talking about the eternal fight for MacBook or iPad. Yes, should I go for a MacBook Pro? Should I go for an iPad Pro? Or in this case, should I go for an M2 MacBook Air? Or should I go for an M2 iPad Air? Or even iPad Pro? So in this video, I want to compare all the things that I've gathered and all the experience that I have from having an M1 Max MacBook Pro 16-inch and having the iPad Pro from 2018. These two devices are the pinnacle of their lineups. Let's just say that. Yes, the M1 Max MacBook Pro 16-inch is the most powerful MacBook Pro ever to be built. And the 2018 iPad Pro with the A12X chip, it's not the most powerful, but it's the symbol of the iPad lineup. It's the best iPad ever in my opinion. It still hasn't been beat by any other and most recent iPads like the 2020 and the 2021 iPad Pros. Those are very similar to this one. And so I can tell that I have all the experience that I need to help you decide between these two devices. I've used the iPad Pro for almost 4 years now, and this MacBook Pro has coming up for 8 months. So yes, I do think I have enough experience with these in both because I use both to create these videos for you guys. So in this video, I will compare them both and help you decide which one is better and tell you if you wanna buy them together, to use them together, how can you do it and which things can you do and which tools can you use to make your iPad Pro and your MacBook Pro work together seamlessly. So in this video, I'll help you a lot. So help me out and leave a like and subscribe to my channel. That will help me out a lot. And I really appreciate your support if you do. So really guys, thank you for your support. It has been incredible for all these months. So no further ado, roll the intro. As you know, the MacBook Pro, it's the more professional tool for everyone. Because the MacBook Pro, instead of being that cool thing that was invented for the millennials, it has been around for several years, way more than the iPad Pro. So the MacBook Pro is that traditional computer experience, let's say that. You have a keyboard, you have a mouse, you have a display, and it's all compacted in one device. This device is the MacBook Pro, and it has the most powerful chip, without considering the M1 Ultra, on a portable device ever. Yes, because this M1 Max MacBook Pro 16-inch features the M1 Max 32 gigabytes of RAM, 32 GPU cores, only missing the extra 32 gigabytes of RAM that I did not thought was necessary for my workflow. But this is the most powerful Apple Silicon chip ever. And why do you ask me, wait, the most powerful? What about the M1 Ultra? Well, the M1 Ultra, it's not present on a portable device, so I will not consider it in this comparison, because if you are considering buying a MacBook Pro or an iPad Pro, you really want a portable device, you don't want a desktop. If you do, then you can leave this video now. This video won't help you out much. But to start out, I want to say that the MacBook Pro, it's the more complete setup. You have everything. You have the best display, you have the best keyboard, the best mouse experience, you have all the programs you need, you have all the support you need, you have the macOS experience, you have everything. You don't lack almost anything. The only thing that you lack is Face ID, but I mean, if that's the bigger deal for you, then go for the iPad Pro. But more than that, you don't lose that much. Of course, the touchscreen experience, it's another thing for you to go for the iPad Pro. But you have to keep in mind that the iPad Pro, it's a weird device. Let's talk about the iPad Pro, shall we? The iPad Pro, it's that type of device that when you pick it up, when you use it, it's incredible. It's like a whole new experience of computing. The first time that I had an iPad, and I was a kid when I had my first iPad, it was the first generation or the second generation iPad. This iPad was quite interesting. It was the first time that I interacted with such a huge touchscreen, and I loved it in first sight. It was my love in first sight. I hated computers from then on. Then I grew up using an iPad, and that same iPad lasted me for 6 years. Yes, I was around 8 to 9 years old when I got my first iPad, and it lasted me until I was 14 to 15. Yes, it was a pretty good experience with my iPad Pro, and I cannot thank enough Apple for that. It took me away from my childhood until my teenage years, and I really enjoyed it a lot. I played games with my cousins, I played games online, I worked on it, I took pictures, I did everything on that iPad. It was insane. I loved it so much, and it's still one of my favorite devices ever, just because when I go back, it has so many memories embedded in it. But then I bought my second iPad ever, which was the 7th generation iPad. Yes, the normal regular iPad. And I bought that for my high school to use it as a notepad just for my notes. And it was a good experience. I mean, it was just crazy, it was great, it worked just fine. Of course, later in that year of school, I realized that the 9.7-inch display that that iPad had wasn't going to cut it for the rest of the high school, just because it was getting slower, it was getting very hot when I was studying for exams. The battery life didn't last me that long, and so I realized I need a new iPad. And so, fortunately, in 2018, Apple released this beast. I was so happy when Apple did it. I watched the whole event on my couch, completely vibrated in what was happening, and I was so excited to see what Apple would release on the new iPad Pro lineup. And so they did. They completely revolutionized the whole industry with the new iPad Pro 2018. Yes, this 2018 iPad Pro had everything. The small bezel treatment that Apple gave the iPhone X. It had the new speaker system, which is just incredible. It had Face ID. It had everything. The new Apple Pencil system that I was so complaining about when using the 7th generation iPad, because it was so stupid to charge it on the normal port. And then I saw it. I saw it my first time on a store, and I was completely in love with it. And I thought to myself, I'm gonna buy one of these to study on. And so I did, and I bought one with the help of my father, and he helped me out. He bought the pencil, bought me the case, and I really appreciated that. But then I started using it and fell in love with it. I immediately fell in love with it. And at this time, I already had a MacBook Pro from 2016 that my parents gave me because I needed a computer for school. The iPad Pro, or even the older iPad, did not cut it for me because of some programs. And now you start to see what's the problem with the iPad. You don't have the full support of some programs that it's very unfortunate, but you are required to use on school. And so I did have a base model MacBook Pro from 2016, the worst computer ever, the worst MacBook Pro ever actually. I mean, I really appreciate it, but I did a video back then, in about 6 months when I first unboxed this computer. That video, I mean, it did great, but the Intel computer is so bad. The Intel chip there is old, it overheats, you cannot edit any videos on it, you cannot do everything on it. You can't just edit documents, export documents, PowerPoint, browsing the web, email. That's just it. It's a very basic computer. It's a MacBook Pro nonetheless, but it's one of the worst, not the worst MacBook Pro ever. And so if you want to watch that video, go back on my channel, search best MacBook Pro ever versus worst MacBook Pro ever, M1 Max MacBook Pro 16-inch versus MacBook Pro 13-inch 2016. Search it and you will find it. It's one of my most viewed videos on my MacBook Pro. So yes, I did like that video, and doing it was pretty fun, but that computer was terrible. And so I used my iPad Pro for everything. I edit videos on that. And when I started my channel, I edited my first year of videos before getting this computer on my iPad Pro. I started to use Final Cut Pro on my family's iMac 21.7-inch, and I used it for quite a while. But then I came to university and I wasn't home as much, and so I had to edit on a go. And I did it on my iPad Pro for almost 5-6 months, and it was crazy. It was very good to do it. I mean, this iPad Pro did everything. I was so used to using LumaFusion. I was very good at it, and then I was very happy using it. But then Apple introduced this computer, and I never looked back. But not going now on the MacBook Pro, I'm gonna wait. The iPad Pro was the device that I used for 4 years non-stop. I loved it. I used it every single day. I destroyed it battery health, and I used it so much. This iPad Pro, it's a warrior. It did so much in its time that I'm very glad I bought it. But now that I have these two devices, I have to tell you the truth. If you want the more complete experience while using a computer, if you want to edit photos, if you want to edit videos, if you want to, I don't know, create 3D graphics, if you want to do everything, 3D modeling, you have to go for the MacBook Pro. You don't have any other choice. The iPad Pro is so limited in programs and apps that you won't be able to do as much work as you would. Sharp 3D is an amazing option for the iPad Pro, but I mean, it's still very limited. You can do some stuff, you can't do another stuff that are very important when 3D modeling. And of course, the universities, the companies, they require SolidWorks, they require other programs that work only on macOS, or even only on Windows, that you have to run a virtual machine on macOS. So that's pretty a bummer. So I had to quit using my iPad Pro as much. I only use it now to take notes and to edit some thumbnails. But that's it. That's the story of the iPad Pro, and that's why I think you should go for the MacBook Pro at the end of the day. because this MacBook Pro is such a complete computer. You can do anything. You have the best display ever on a computer. But this is the M1 Max MacBook Pro 16-inch, and this is the 2018 iPad Pro. What about the future? Well, we are hearing reports that the M2 MacBook Air might be coming this WWDC, and other leaks are suggesting that the iPad Pro with the M2 chip might be coming at the end of this year. So we might be near another clash, the M2 iPad Pro versus the M2 MacBook Air. Well, the M2 MacBook Air might be a redesign, might be the M2 chip, might be the mini LED display, might have only one port, but it will still be a MacBook. It will still have macOS. The only thing that still separates these two devices in a very defined way is their operating system. The MacBook Pro can do anything you want to in terms of workloads, while the iPad Pro is very limited by the iPadOS system. So Apple just needs to improve iPadOS on WWDC. But that's difficult. They haven't done it in about 4 years since they released this iPad, and now I do not believe they will. So yes, Apple just needs to change some tiny things on iPadOS to make it a competitor to the MacBook Pro. But the iPad Pro, as you know, it's still limited in some stuff, like the I/O, like the ports, the display, the thermal design. The M2 MacBook Air will be superior in all of that. So if you really want the complete experience on a computer, you should go for the MacBook Air still. The iPad Pro, even if it gets the M2 chip, the same chip that the MacBook Air will get, then it won't be enough. Apple needs to improve so much things on the iPad lineup to make it a MacBook Pro or even a MacBook competitor that right now I cannot advise you to buy an iPad Pro instead of a MacBook if you really need to do some serious work. But if you are a normal consumer, then the iPad Pro and the iPad, it's just built for you. I wouldn't advise you to go for the iPad Pro. If you don't go for the iPad Pro, go for a refurbished one. But if you really want an iPad, then go for the iPad Air. Go for the iPad normal generation. Those can do the same stuff that this iPad can, and they are very cool to use. They are very fun, they have fun colors, and they are not Pro. You won't spend that much money on it. I completely recommend the iPad mini. That's, in my opinion, the best iPad for the iPad experience, the iPadOS experience, as it is right now. So, like I was telling at the beginning of this video, and like I will end it, this iPad Pro, it's an amazing competitor to the MacBook Pro, but it's not a MacBook Pro killer. Just because it doesn't have the required system, doesn't have the required I/O, and it doesn't have the support that it needs. So, yes, the iPad Pro has so much potential, but yes, this potential is being wasted. So I have to give the point to the MacBook Pro. I have to give the move to the MacBook Pro. Go for the MacBook Pro. Buy the MacBook Pro. They are about the same price. If you really want, go for the M2 MacBook Air. Wait for it in the future. Go for the M2 MacBook Air. I do still advise you for going for the M2 MacBook Air, then the M2 iPad Pro. That's my advice for you. I do still think that the M1 Max MacBook Pro is the best option, even better than the M2 MacBook Air. Wait and see if the M1 Max gets discounted now. That might be your best bet. But like I was telling you, go for a MacBook instead of an iPad if you want to do real work. If you don't want to do real work, you just want to do simple stuff like browsing the web, watching emails, watching videos, browsing the web, then the iPad Pro is just the best multimedia machine out there. But that's my opinion. What's yours? Can you do real work on the iPad Pro or the M2 iPad Pro? Will you wait for it? Will you buy it even if it has new things like MagSafe support and Face ID? Or will you just wait for the M2 MacBook Air and go for a MacBook? Or are you using the M1 Max MacBook Pro right now? Let me know in the comments down below that. And of course, do not forget to leave a like and subscribe to my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram. This was Tex Talking to you here. Bye.